Let's bring in our political editor here at Sky News, Andrew Clennell, for some analysis. Andrew, great to have you as always. Pretty significant that we're at this NATO summit. It's the biggest ever, we're told. Of course, we're not there as a member of NATO. We're there because we're an observer. There'll be obviously issues, I think, on the agenda around the Indo-Pacific. But outside the NATO members, we are Australia, the biggest provider of military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. The PM there talking about potentially reopening our embassy in Ukraine. I think that is a very good move if that eventuates. So other than a lot of talk over the next 48 hours, what else can we expect?
Well, the reports that are emerging this morning are talking about 300,000 troops being on high alert. Should Russia go further than the Ukraine? There's talk of a key policy document being redrawn, so NATO's mission isn't just about Russia and Europe, it becomes about the Asia-Pacific as well. They'll discuss again Finland and Sweden entering NATO. As you say, we're an observer. Just feels like every couple of months there's one of these summits where there's a show of strength to Russia and China, but it doesn't deter Vladimir Putin any.
No, it doesn't, and I'm aware of comments made by the former President Poroshenko in Europe, in Berlin, actually, in the last couple of hours, where he has said very clearly that he doesn't want Ukraine to have to back down to Putin. They feel that he's been the absolute aggressor here, and they want to fight and not have some sort of, not have to cop some sort of peace deal. I think that's probably the general view of Ukrainians.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question of any peace deal. I don't think it just rolls on. It will roll on for some time. It seems like an intractable situation. Ukraine can't push Russia away, and they keep asking for a no-fly zone from the West. Joe Biden said before that would lead to nuclear war. No thanks. And they're not getting that, so no doubt they'll be promised some more assistance, military assistance, including from Australia. And this thing will go for months, if not years.
Do you think we're going to see an increase in Australia's military support?
I do. I think, Anthony Albanese would have been ready for that if he was to visit Kyiv, because he's got to promise something. I'm not even sure he'll visit Kyiv now because it's really up to... So I reckon last Saturday he was visiting Kyiv, Peter, but after these missile strikes, you probably, as a Prime Minister, shouldn't be going in there. And he talks about the RAAF personnel as well. But nevertheless, that would have been worked up, and no doubt it will be pledged.
Look, I bet you he wants to go. I have been with a PM when they've wanted to go into countries they perhaps shouldn't go into, and it all comes down to security advice. It's not just him, it'll be all the officials that have to go with him. So whether he goes or not, he'll get no criticism from me. I do hope, though, we get the embassy back up and running and we have some support on the table. Interestingly, the G7 met, obviously, before this NATO summit. They've now created their own version of China's Belt and Road. There's $600 billion on the table to counter China's debt diplomacy. I suspect plenty of pressure for Australia to tip in some millions here as well.
Well, I guess we're already doing that in the Pacific, and we'll continue to do that, and that's really our backyard that we have to assist in relation to that. Interestingly, obviously, the $600 billion isn't just public funds. It's talking about raising private funds. I'm always suspicious about that. But it seems action a bit too late. It's never too late, but action later than it should be, in the sense the world's been caught napping a bit. I guess Trump was focused on the domestic, and now the world has to rush to try and counter this Chinese influence. I mean, they've been working on it for some years. Even got Dan Andrews to sign up to Belt and Road, didn't they? So, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, but
it's
just
about
on that
time.
point, we were alive to it. Australia was alive to it being a very dodgy deal. We've seen issues in Sri Lanka and places where they've funded infrastructure and then they've defaulted on the loan, and then China's taken it over. We were alive to this as a country, but Daniel Andrews, went around DFAT in Canberra, went around the official advice and signed up to it. So I think Australia's been ahead of the game.
Yes, that's probably true. That is true, certainly. Things like foreign interference legislation, then legislation to allow the feds to cover this under Scott Morrison. Very true. I remember revealing via an FOI the rush from the Victorian government to Foreign Affairs. Can you tick off on this so we can get out there and announce it? and the crankiness with which Dan Andrews took the fact that it would be cancelled. Well, I think perhaps he looks a bit foolish over that now.
Yeah, not just that, over plenty of other things too. I mean, we have never seen the actual full text of that deal. Let's hope we see it before the election. Let's go to the other announcements out of Canberra today. The Acting Prime Minister, Defence Minister Richard Marles, he has announced an extension to the current CDF, Chief of Defence Force, General Angus Campbell's term. He'll take it out for another 2 years. This is the first time we've extended the CDF since, I think something like 2008, so that's quite a big deal. The Acting Prime Minister had this to say.
I feel that we have been very lucky to have General Campbell in place whilst this really difficult issue has faced our country. And there remains work to be done in terms of the Brereton report. We do have real capability challenges facing the country, most significantly delivering the next generation of submarines. You know, to that end, I think it really is important that we have some continuity. Governments govern, or they don't, and the former government did not. This new government, the Albanese government, intends to govern.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, there was likely to be a change here in the CDF position. Today, he's been extended. I actually think this is a good thing. I think we change our ministers in this country too often, and when you change a minister, the clock starts again for the department and all the things they're supposed to do. They know they're going to get away with stuff until a new minister works it out. Having continuity in the Defence Uniform Brigade, I think that's a very good thing. We've got a lot on our plate. What do you think, Andrew?
Well, they replaced the 3 service chiefs, so it would have been courageous in Yes Minister parlance to change out the CDF at the same time. Why they all came up at once is something people have said to me today was an interesting decision to have them all up at once. David Johnston could have filled in though. They could have promoted the deputy, but he's decided safety first. In this instance, Richard Marles, and as you pointed out, last time this happened, Rudd was in power, Angus Houston got extended. This time they were elected May 21, the term was up in July 6, so they had to be quick about a decision, and I guess it's the most obvious decision. Now they'll have to look at succession planning. Someone did remark to me today, however, that David Johnston would be pretty disappointed with this decision, Peter.
No, I think it's a good move. As I said, continuity is important. Hey, how about those Teals? They've arrived in Canberra today. They've got their 2-day orientation, learning about parliamentary procedure and everything else. They're still very cranky that the PM has wound back their numbers. Now, I want to add here for people at home, they still get one more staffing position than anyone on the backbench gets, government backbencher or coalition backbencher, and they get about the same staff as most of the coalition shadow ministry. So what's all the whinging, Andrew? Didn't they think they'd have to actually work if they got elected?
Yeah, it's interesting, particularly for new members. And I see that senators perhaps have a bit more of a point on this, and in a minority government situation, maybe you have a little bit more of a point, but I can't see the argument. I think, are you going to die on this particular hill? Nevertheless, it's an interesting move by Anthony Albanese. I've seen people do this before. They get into power, and I'm talking about his general budget cut. He's cut his own staff budget, and that, of course, flows on to the opposition budget, which is a percentage. I never think that's a particularly good idea. And I've seen it done before. I won't name the instance in another parliament, but it seemed a bit of petty vindictiveness. I think staff work pretty damn hard in that place. They do a pretty important job. The old saying is good minister, good staff, and the opposite. So I think that is a little bit short-sighted by Anthony Albanese. I know there's got to be a lot of budget repair, but when you become PM, you want the best staff.
I disagree. You get around the world,
entitled to.
You'll find in the British government, for example, all the ministers have 2 staff, maybe 3. Our ministers, composite, let's look at the Foreign Affairs Minister here in Australia, Penny Wong will have something like 12 to 15 staff. Her counterpart in the United Kingdom will have 3 staff only. In the US administration, it's a little bit different because you elect a president, not just the congressional members, but very, very different. I think we have more than enough staff in Canberra. I think they're going to be paid fairly. I think they've got to have good entitlements and all the other stuff too. But I back the PM in on this, surprisingly. I think Anthony Albanese has got the balance back to where it should be.
Fair enough, but I've heard those British ministerial staff whinge about the Yes Minister effect and the effect of Whitehall running the joint. I guess if you don't have enough staff, that's what can happen too, Peter.
Yeah, I'm not saying go back to 2 or 3. I think the 10 or 15 is about right. Andrew Clennell, thank you for your time.